Welcome to Handmade Happenings. I'm Marissa, and recently my grandmother asked me to make a nightgown to give to my niece. Now, I didn't have a nightgown pattern that was going to fit her, so I used this as an excuse to buy the Classic Sewing Magazine 2024 Summer Edition, which has this ladies' nightgown pattern in it. Now, my niece is just old enough that if I make the extra small, it should fit her. Now, when my grandmother mentioned this project, she mentioned lace and ribbon and ruffles and, all the fun trims to be used on this project. And really, she would probably be very happy if I was to do the pattern envelope and just the white with the white lace and everything. However, because that nightgown was designed for a lady's pattern, to me, it's just a little too grown up for my niece. So what I did instead is, first off, I let my niece pick the fabric, and I didn't tell her what it was for. We were already out shopping for fabric for something else, and I just said, pick an extra fabric for something else. I have another project going on. And she picked this unicorn quilting cotton, which is just, lovely pastels. So that is the fabric that I'm using. However, I still had to add all of the trim because not only do I enjoy the trim, but I still wanted my grandmother to be happy with how it turned out. And I just didn't want all the white. So I bought a grab bag of trim from Farmhouse Fabrics. They're selling these, I think it's like considered by the gallon. They're gallon size bags with just random trims in it. So I went through that and I just pulled all the trims that seemed like they would go well with this fabric. And then after I had pulled them and kind of gone through everything, I went through it again and narrowed it down to the ones that I thought could work with the pattern. So with all of the planning done, I set about cutting out my pattern. And I should note that pretty much beyond using the pattern pieces, I mostly did not follow the pattern as far as the directions and everything, because of just some of the decisions that I had made as far as designs. So when I was cutting it out, I ended up cutting out 2 front yoke pieces, 2 back yoke pieces, and then 1 each of the lower, main pieces of the gown. I'm going to start by talking about the nightgown yoke. So the first thing I did was the embellishments, and I found this piece of trim. I'm not sure exactly what it actually was, but what it reminded me of is what, at least in the heirloom sewing community, is called beading, which is used where you can, it's kind of got big holes and you can weave ribbon through it. So I cut a piece of this just a little longer than the center front yoke, like the center of this front yoke. And then I found some purple ribbon, which I wove through those holes. And once that was woven, I placed it centered on the front yoke and stitched it down. I then found this pink lace, very bright pink, but perfect with this fabric, and I just stitched that on either side of it so it covered the edges of the beading. Then I stitched the yoke front and back pieces together at the shoulder seams and repeated that also for the lining. Now for the neckline, the original pattern has lace around it, and I didn't really want to do that, plus I couldn't find any lace that was kind of the right shape and style for it, and definitely not the right colors. So instead I made some corded piping using the same fabric as the nightgown, and I just basted it onto the main yoke neckline, then placed the yoke to the yoke lining right sides together and stitched around the neckline before clipping the curves and flipping it right side out. Now for the main part of the nightgown. I took the front and back pieces and stitched them together at the side seams, then folded up and hemmed the bottom. Then I took this purple lace and lined the edge of the lace up with the edge of the hem and stitched it on. This was a little tricky just because it was kind of a stretchy lace, and so it kept wanting to shift around, and I had some puckering, but it was okay. And I did do this by machine and with white thread, you may notice, just because I already was planning on covering the top of the trim, or of the lace, with another piece of trim. Next, I ran gathering threads along the top of the main nightgown pieces. I then gathered these pieces up to the width of the bottom of the yoke pieces and stitched them down to the outer yoke only. I left the lining free because the next part was to fold up the raw edges of the lining yoke and stitch those down, as well as to baste the lining and outer yoke pieces together at the armholes. Next, I took more of that pink lace and just attached it to the front of the nightgown right over the seam where the yoke attaches to the main part. Then I took this string of white sequins and attached those on top using a very wide zigzag stitch and clear thread. And I also used this to cover the top of the purple lace around the hem. Then all that was left was to use bias tape to finish the armholes. I am very happy with how this turned out. It's kind of like a vintage style but with a modern twist and just a lot of color, and I am pretty sure both my grandmother and my niece will be very pleased with it.